Have you ever ended a relationship because you thought that there was too much conflict in it or too much drama? Or maybe you have the tendency to avoid conflict altogether, be it in a romantic relationship or at work or with your family. Let me tell you that you're not alone. There might be a fear of conflict, and there's a great secure attachment skill that can be learned that we're going to be talking about today, which is rupture and repair. So, what is rupture and repair? Rupture and repair is pretty much the ability to go through conflict, through any type of rupture, like a fight with a loved one, for example, or any type of fire discussion or difference in opinion that can lead to conflict. And then that going through the conflict, you can learn and you can grow, and there's an opportunity to repair whatever was broken or ruptured. And this is in general rupture and repair. Now, people with an avoidant attachment style usually lack this skill, or if they have it, it's very weak or hidden within them. And there's many reasons for this. One of the main reasons, of course, is how you were raised. So we as kids, right, when we're being raised by our parents, we copy what our parents do and we learn a lot of these skills from them. Let's just say that your parents used to give you the cold treatment, which tends to happen when they themselves, the parents, can get sensitive about a certain topic or they feel hurt. So in that way, they think they're teaching you something, they're giving you a lesson, but what they're teaching you is that unless you do what they want, then there is no repair, right? So this, although it can lead to a repair, it's an unhealthy one. Another thing that can happen is that we watch how our parents fight as we were kids, right? And then if perhaps the fights or the discussions were very, very fiery, and it led to they being getting divorced or separated for some time, or maybe simply it took them a long time to get back together and to find the middle way, right, to repair that rupture. So you might have generalized that conflict in general leads to that, and it's very serious. So the best thing is to avoid it, and one way to avoid it is, well, first avoid it altogether by avoiding any conflictive situation, or once there is one, by withdrawing and doing what's called stonewalling, for example. Or other people, what they do is that they apply extreme boundaries, which means they say no directly from the beginning and they close off completely to any opportunities of negotiation. And on the other hand, still there are people that are overly compliant, that do not look at their boundaries or what they want, and they do what the other side wants or needs so that they can avoid conflict. So these are just a couple of possibilities that can happen when we do not have the skill of rupture and repair. Now, securely attached individuals have this skill very, very naturally because they learned it from their parents and perhaps from other people as well, but especially from parents. So, how could that have looked in the past? Maybe their parents had discussions, but then they would get back together after a couple of conversations, and it wouldn't take that long. It wouldn't take days even. That's one example. Another one would be that when their parents would, let's say their mother was angry at the child, right? Then she would find a way to get through the conflict securely with confidence and speak about it without hiding, without getting overly angry, but calmly and firmly stating what's going on and perhaps apologizing or finding the middle ground, which is usually how we get into a type of repair. So this is very important to understand this term of a middle ground. So whenever there's conflict, what happens usually is that there's two sides, and each side is pulling apart, is pulling into different directions, right? So we have side A here, side B here. We're going this way. And what we have to do is to find the middle ground. With an improperly learned rupture and repair, what happens is that both sides stay here and nobody gets close to each other, or maybe one side just gets completely close to the other one so they can avoid the conflict, and because it's getting too uh, troublesome to deal with those emotions that are associated with conflict, perhaps because of a fear of being rejected by this side. But the best way is if both people move to the center. And this requires a lot of courage, a lot of maturity as well. And of course, when we're kids, we don't have these skills. We learn them from the adults. But when we are adults, then we have no one to teach us anymore, right? So we have to find a way to learn this on our own. And of course, there's training grounds everywhere. There's our relationships with perhaps our loved one, or with with family, or at work. And all of these give us the opportunities to negotiate. This is very important. When we're trying to find that middle ground, we're practicing negotiation skills that are crucial in order for us to learn this skill of rupture and repair. And these skills were usually not learned again as kids, especially for avoidance. So what are some tips in order to learn rupture and repair properly? The first one is that conflict is not black or white. This is very important because what happens usually is that when an avoidant sees or smells conflict, his brain turns on the black or white lights there. And this signal, what it's telling him or her, is that conflict is dangerous. If I go there, it's over. Whatever it is, that relationship is over. Or he will be rejected and he will not be loved like completely. And this is very subconscious. I mean, perhaps he's not thinking that, but that's that subconscious belief is leading to a fear of the conflict itself. That's making him uh, very insecure about what's going to happen. So this is why many people with an avoidant attachment style tend to avoid conflict altogether. So remember, there's no black or white. There's also a gray zone in between, and conflict is not the end of the world. So when you change those black or white light into a gray zone, you can then approach conflict with another light, seeing it as normal, because conflict is normal. This is something very crucial to understand. It's not just normal, but it's necessary to go through conflict so that you can learn from each other, so that you can also state your needs. And in the end, it can help you to grow and to strengthen the bond that you have with whoever you're having um, that conflict. So again, that's the first tip. Remember that there's no black or white, and that conflict is necessary in almost every relationship. The second tip is to learn to apologize. There are times in which we do hurt other people, and it's important to recognize that. Of course, when we're closing off completely in the middle of a conflict, when we still have all that anger running through our bodies, it's very hard to do that at that time. So give yourself the space that you might need so that you can allow those emotions to settle, and then dare to open up and to apologize if you really did something wrong. This is again crucial for rupture and repair. The third tip is to learn to forgive and let go. So we were talking before in tip number 2 about us hurting someone, right? and us learning to apologize. But it can be also that we were hurt. There's something that was done against us. And in order for us to really find a repair, we have to learn to forgive. So you have to remember here something that's important, and it is that when you do not forgive, you hold a grudge. And when you hold a grudge, it's pretty much like you're holding poison within you. And it's like having that poison within you, but wishing that that poison affects the other person and makes them learn a lesson. But who's getting really affected mostly is you. Also necessary to forgive is to not take the conflict personally. Remember that conflict is a necessary part of life and that everyone has their own things going on. You know, they have their own issues, their own thoughts, their own emotions, and their own lens through which they see the world. And as they're trying to do whatever they're doing, they can hurt other people, right? And if it weren't you, perhaps they would be hurting someone else. So it's not healthy for you to take it personally. What you can do is to actually observe and try to understand the emotions that come up when you feel hurt. These usually come from your past, and these are just reenactment, so to speak, of things that happened to you before. And your body is giving you, or your life itself is giving you an opportunity to revisit those emotions and to let them be and to process them. But the moment that you close off, you're pretty much accumulating that emotion and that energy within you. And you're setting yourself up for this to happen again because you're not allowing it to flow. So, what I mean by this is that you can take these opportunities of conflict, especially when you are hurt, to heal your past and to heal this energy that can be accumulated in you. And my last bonus tip is to practice rupture and repair. Practice speaking up. Use your common sense. You won't want to go and make your boss angry just out of the blue, right? Or tell something to your partner just to bother her. It's not what I mean by this, but really to notice when your needs are not being met or when you're doing something against what you really want, and practice stating it. And this can create some conflict. Perhaps also when you do not agree with something and you have to say or you want to say no, then practice doing that. And do it even before you enter into such a situation. You can consciously enter it by remembering the previous three tips, which are that nothing is black or white. So also that conflict is normal. It's part of that same first tip. That it is okay to forgive, and that it's important and okay to forgive, and that it's important and okay to apologize. So if you go through a conflictive situation having all of this in mind, it will become a lot easier to practice and to do it. So the more that you can do that, the easier it will become next time you have such a situation. And you will notice that you won't be as afraid anymore of going to conflict because you will have done it already. And it's like your muscle becomes more resilient and more powerful, your conflict muscle, so to speak, so that you can repair almost any situation. Okay, so this has been today's video. I hope that you have enjoyed it. And don't forget to subscribe, to hit like on my video if you have liked it, and to leave your comments and questions in the comment section. Finally, if you have any problem or any issue or challenge with fear of commitment or with your avoidant attachment style, don't hesitate to write me an email or to apply directly for coaching. I'll leave the link in the description. See you next time. Thank you.